Gunnera Manicata, the Goliath of the pond and bog plants. I'm going to fight my way out of this prickly mess. Oh. Well, good morning, I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics and welcome to another pond plant A to Z. And I couldn't possibly leave out this magnificent specimen, Gunnera Manicata. It is without doubt one of the most impressive and imposing plants that you're going to see really in any sort of UK garden, particularly around ponds. Brazilian giant rhubarb is its common name. Very obviously why, reminiscent of a rhubarb with these leaves, but these leaves can get absolutely enormous, up to about 2 meters across. So almost twice the size of this current specimen. And this is a big plant. This has been beside this pond now for about 15 years. And I've had the pleasure of being able to see this establish and grow during that time. And it has become a fantastic clump. This is where, if I'm not careful, I'm going to fall in and get very wet. So Gunneras are a herbaceous perennial. They'll die back in winter. They're not fully UK frost hardy, so temperatures below kind of -5, they need to be protected. But thankfully it's quite an easy thing to do, and this is what I'm going to be doing today. These stems, as they start to brown off for autumn, become fantastic cover for the plant rhizome itself. So very simply folding over these large leaves to create a pile of foliage over the rhizome, over the crown of the plant, is sufficient to protect it during winter. Now Gunnera is a bog plant rather than a pond marginal. It doesn't want to grow in the pond, it wants to have its feet, its roots growing in the wet ground beside a pond, and then it will allow itself to grow towards the water source. In this instance, it started off as quite a small rhizome at the pond edge. Some of it spread into the water, and a very, very large quantity of it has grown away from the pond into the border beyond. This is a very, very thirsty plant, and even on a pond of this volume, which is about 10,000 gallons in the summer months when we don't have any rain, this is drawing and taking away quite a large volume of water from the pond, so it does require more frequent top-ups as a result. Now, there are some smaller varieties of Gunnera. The Manicata certainly is only really suitable for very large gardens. Tinctoria is a slightly smaller variety, but it's still a pretty big plant. But I've been led to believe that that one is no longer available, as it's classed as an invasive species, so you'll have to look into that one a little bit further. Indeed, Gunnera Manicata itself is on an invasive list. It's not illegal to sell or to grow in your garden, but it is illegal to dispose of it irresponsibly. So you don't want this to get into areas away from your garden, natural water sources and boggy areas where it may well start to take over. And the problem with plants like this is that they are such an imposing plant with such a large leaf that they shade everything else beneath it, preventing anything else from growing. But what a fantastic plant. I mean, it really does look reminiscent of some prehistoric plant. You can imagine giant dragonflies and other insects and things flying around. And from inside, looking up at the canopy, it's quite unworldly. Just look how far it spread from the pond. So that was the original clump growing around here at the water's edge. And it's moved back about 7 feet. Here's the extent of the final growing tip. I mean, this looks like a gigantic kind of triffid, doesn't it? And these enormous spiky stems. But that's probably about the extent, the distance that this is going to spread as it moves further and further away from its natural water source. Now Gunnera is quite an easy plant to take cuttings from. This enormous rhizome, just taking sections of that with a small growing shoot is all that's required to propagate and start a new specimen. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do today. One of the recent ponds that I built, a nice natural wildlife pond, is crying out for a big specimen plant like this. So I'm going to take away a small cutting of this to give to my clients, and something that can be planted up next year once we get through the winter. I prefer to take cuttings in the spring, but at this time of year, if we store the cutting in damp conditions, damp soil, rather than standing in water in a greenhouse, it'll overwinter and it'll be fine to start a new plant next season. Seems a shame to do this, but it'll be back next year with a vengeance for this protection. Now it is quite prickly, so make sure you're wearing some thick gloves when you're doing this. There we go. Simple as that. Protected for another winter. And this will be fine. I mean, last year in this part of the UK, we got down to about -10, -12. We had a week of daytime temperatures that didn't get above 0. And like this, the plant was absolutely fine and it bounced back again this season without any issues. If you don't want to do it this way, you can also use a bit of straw or a bit of hessian or a bit of fleece. But much simpler just to use the foliage, the materials to hand, and as you see, this whole clump has only taken me about 10 minutes, so nice and easy. Oh, there we go. So, that's my cutting for today. I'll take away these main stems and leaves, but I got a nice chunk of rhizome, some of these aerial roots, and some shoots. So that, stored over winter in the greenhouse in a tray of some damp soil, will provide the beginnings of a nice specimen, a nice plant for next season. Right, well, that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and I'll see you in the next pond.